Welcome to Shoulder to Shoulder, the ultimate peer support podcast. In each episode, we celebrate the incredible power of peer support and the way it transforms lives. So whether you're navigating mental health challenges or just curious, you're definitely in the right place.
Gary, welcome. It's wonderful to finally sit down and have a chat with you. I've been really keen to speak to a member of the veterans community about peer support because I know from conversations with members of the armed forces how they can struggle with mental health for a variety of reasons, particularly once they leave. So this is a real pleasure. We finally got a date and time together that we could both do. Could you just start by telling us a bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, certainly. And again, it's a great pleasure to be here. I feel somewhat honoured. Obviously, my name's Gary. I'm currently working as a peer support worker in the NHS for a specialist service called Courage. So a little bit about me. I grew up in the northeast in a small mining village in the early 70s. And that was a fantastic time, but economically it was quite challenging for my parents to make ends meet, as most of the country was in the 70s. So at the age of 9-year-old, I think it was, my dad joined the RAF and off we went on this great adventure for the next 20 years in the RAF and, well, the Air Force in general. And that took us all over, mostly in Germany for myself.
Do you enjoy that?
Yeah, it was a fantastic time. Certainly the adventure of it initially was, you can imagine coming from a small little mining village in Newcastle, and then whisked away to RAF bases and seeing your dad in uniform, and it was like a little adventure. It wasn't without its challenges, Kate. You're starting over again, aren't you, when you go? And I think a lot of people in the forces feel that you adapt to it eventually, but it's challenging at first because you're starting over.
Fantastic. What's Courage? Just explain a little bit about that.
So Courage is the NHS. We all work for the NHS, but Courage is a veterans' mental health and wellbeing service. It was felt probably around 2018, I think it was, that veterans and their families were finding it quite challenging to navigate the NHS system, certainly with mental health challenges. And it was felt that we needed a dedicated service. So Courage is that service, and it's staffed by former members of the armed forces, so veterans or people that have had a close association to the military. So, and I think that's quite an important offer for our veterans community to know that they're talking with their own.
Yeah, that's the basis of like peer support, isn't it? That's the whole sort of lived experience thing that I guess we'll go into. How did you first get involved in peer support then?
Well, that was somewhat further down the line in my recovery, really. It was certainly not on the radar. I hadn't aspired to become a peer support worker, and I was working with one of the services that were helping me recover.
Yeah. And
peer support was muted as a way of supporting people through some of the most challenging periods of their life.
Yeah.
The insight you'd gained yourself.
Yeah, so through your own lived experience. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just a totally new concept to me. I hadn't even, as I say, there's something around mental health services it's a whole world, isn't it? And it's not until you're pushed into it do you realise, what's going on.
And it can be such a daunting world, can't it? Particularly if you've kind of, your first experience of mental health support is as an inpatient, you kind of think, whoa, is this it? But there's a whole other world out there, isn't there, of peer support?
Well, I suppose in some regards, I was getting peer support, but totally informally. So that was with other people that were on the ward, also having a challenging time. And I do recall that being really therapeutic. It was very normalising for me in a way that possibly some of the professionals or the people that were providing the care didn't feel that it was therapeutic, certainly in an inpatient setting. And I think some of the conversations I was having with other people going through challenging experiences, and maybe that wasn't their first time on an inpatient ward.
Yeah.
Them connections were, reflecting back on that, they were so valuable to me just for normalising what was happening.
Wow. That's the first time I've heard someone say that actually, but now you've said it, I can really understand it, because who better to kind of get, peer values kind of from than the people in your sort of close proximity who are going through their own challenges. And that feeling of validation is so important, isn't it?
Kate, I remember waking up the first morning on the inpatient ward and just this overwhelming sense of fear. How has it come to this? And just a random thing happened as a chap walked up to me, and he must have noticed I was struggling with the environment. And he was of a similar age to me. And for some reason, he felt it appropriate to come up to me, and he just talked to me for 5 minutes. And I can't really recall what we said, but I just remember thinking, them random acts of human kindness.
Yes.
And it was so welcome at the time.
Restores your faith in human nature, doesn't it?
Yeah, it was just almost, how did he know I was struggling? Maybe he's been on that path himself,
Beautiful.
It was most welcome at the time.
Incredible. So your first kind of experience of peer support would have been as an inpatient in a clinical setting, which is kind of ironic, isn't it? But that's a really beautiful thing. So how would you define peer support then in your own words? What does it mean for you?
I think that's really important to define it in your own words, first of all, because anybody who does formalised version of peer support, so they're employed maybe in the NHS, or it can become extremely wordy what peer support is, can't it? It doesn't feel personalised. And I give this a lot of thought. Quite frequently, I think about peer support and what it is. And I suppose to try and distill it, for me anyway, it's just about human connection. It's just about that. It's supporting people. and I think it works best if you're supporting somebody who maybe has had similar life experiences to you. I think that's when it's most powerful. So I don't think it's vitally important, but it seems to me that it's most powerful when people have come from similar backgrounds.
So are you suggesting that it's preferable that people have the same sort of experiences, or could the experiences be just mental health challenges? Do you think it helps to actually come from, for example, in your case, a kind of military background?
Yeah, I think on a certain level, just around the authenticity thing, so much of peer support, one-to-one peer support, is often unspoken. Again, I don't think it's hard and fast rule, but I just kind of think it works at a different level when people have had similar experiences in life.
Are you kind of a person that would prefer group peer support, or you prefer the one-to-one?
Yeah, I'm not great in groups. I have to be honest. I'm just not. It's kind of threes is a crowd for me. Certainly when it comes to peer support,
Yeah, me too.
Again, it goes back to that connection thing, that human connection. And often it's unspoken, just an awareness of each other, that you have both trodden similar paths in life. It's definitely not within my skill set to be an effective peer in a group setting. Although I do keep putting myself in group settings because I try and push myself in presentations. And I think that's an important element. But you kind of got to know where your groove is, and I'm more effective one-to-one than I am in a group setting. And I've met some amazing peers that are just so fantastic in a group setting. But
me too. I work with some of them, fantastic. I just know where I'm personally more comfortable. And if I was receiving peer support, I'm better in a one-to-one setting.
If I think back to when I was so really poorly, I found the most value in a quiet place with somebody, one person, one-on-one, where I could be truly honest and open. And I had undoubted trust in that person. I think that's really important because we, as peers, we rock up and we think it's a given that people would trust us enough to tell us about some of their most challenging experiences they've had in their life. It's not a given that. In some regards, that kind of has to be, earn's the wrong word. I don't know what the word is, but it's that mutuality, isn't it? It's where I feel safe with this person. And it is a feeling. You kind of get it when you're with somebody that you think, but I feel safe telling this person some of the things that I'm even going to find challenging talking about.
Absolutely. And I've grappled with that throughout my life. There's only ever been one person that I've been supported by that I've ever been able to begin to even open the box about what happens. So it is a very, very special and unique connection. Different things work for different people, don't they?
I think as humans, Kate, we have a veil, don't we? And some people never feel comfortable pulling that veil away, and we get layers, don't we? We give away layers. But do we really give of our all, talk about everything? And I think sometimes in the role I'm doing now, sometimes you can sense when somebody is letting you see behind the veil. It's such an honour, but it's a hell of a responsibility as well, what you do with that information.
Just going back, if I may, to what you said about your first experience of peer support, you mentioned that it was informal in an inpatient setting. Have you had any since then in different settings?
No, I don't think formal peer support wasn't offered to me when I was accessing mental health services. So this would be in 2019, 2021, I was accessing secondary mental health services. Peer support was just in its inception then. It wasn't really, hence the reason why when I was told about peer support, I've never heard of it. I don't even know what it is,
Yeah.
In some regards, I wish I had been offered it, because for me, it has been the driver for getting into peer support, because I felt it was a massive hole in what services were trying to do and trying their best. But there was just this yawning gap of that human connection.
Because there is nothing more powerful for me than being validated in the way you're feeling, being validated in the way you have behaved, because with a lot of mental health challenges, something has happened and the shame or the grief or whatever you're living with, that manifests itself right throughout your life, doesn't it? In my experiences, and to have that validated is the most powerful thing.
Yeah. I mean, one of the joys of becoming a peer in the NHS is I've met some incredible people, peers, absolute warriors, really, It's quite humbling to be in their company sometimes, I mean, they're some of the kindest people I've met in my life.
Without doubt.
And the 48 years preceding me needing mental health inpatient services, I hadn't met a lot of people like that in life, and to meet these people who have turned, real adversity in their life and turned it around and want to use it for good. They certainly don't do it for financial gain. They do it on the most wholesome of reasons, is that, I just don't want somebody to experience what I experienced. Possibly I want to make their passage a little bit better,
I feel the same about the training that I deliver. The incredible people that I meet on there, it is truly humbling and eye-opening and inspiring. It's just incredible, because you're right. I don't think I've met anybody like that in such abundance in any other walk of life, in anything I've ever done. But here in the training, you've got looking at 20 people who have the most incredible stories, and it really is humbling.
Yeah, and when people experience real adversity in their life, and then they use the learning from that adversity, and they've probably got every right to feel bitter and twisted and angry and want to, but they don't. They go the other way. I don't know. It's just the essence of human kindness for me.
Yeah, humanity in action.
Yeah,
that's how I think of it. So, what do you think then sets peer support apart from other forms of support or therapy or kind of interventions?
Well, people taking adversity in their life, and let's be honest, Kate, a lot of peers are doing it to make themselves feel good about themselves as well. I think that's really important, that it isn't a one-way thing, it's a two-way thing. Peers are often, may have a low self-esteem, a low self-worth, and actually offering peer support is a way of managing that fragile sense of self.
Yeah.
In a more hopeful way, I think anybody who's been in mental health services, Kate, will know this yawning gap that I'm talking about. And for want of a better word, it sometimes feels like nobody cares, when actually the one thing that you need is care.
Yeah.
It sounds crazy, doesn't it? I recall go back to the ward and just thinking I needed caring for at the time, but that was the one thing that wasn't there.
Yeah.
And it seemed crazy to me, that there was no care, but there was lots of efficient people and professionals telling me, and it was very efficient. But, that care element was missing.
Yeah. And I think truly caring comes from empathy. And that's where peer support comes in, because if you can empathize with another human being, you are caring for them, aren't you? And you are understanding their pain. And I think that's one of the sort of bedrocks of peer support is being able to empathize. And just going back to what you were saying about why people do this, it's that sense of giving, isn't it? We talk about that in the peer support training. It's not giving in a material sense, but giving of your humanity, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a funny thing, isn't it? Because when I first become a peer, I sort of felt like I had to be this sort of bastion of recovery, and I've recovered so well that I can help other people. But actually, that's not where it's at. It's showing you vulnerability, that normalizes it for the people that you sat with. It's actually, I still go through really difficult times, really, really difficult times. And it normalizes it for people. But I think if we do have a gift to give, Kate, I have to be honest, it's building that sense of in somebody. I recall thinking back at lots of questions. Why is this happening? Why is that? Why is and in some regards, them kind of people who have lots of them questions like that are the most appropriate for peer support, because then people have curiosity and they want to understand their experiences. And I wasn't that person for 20 years. I just wanted to take medication and make it all go away. But the hard thing was understanding, after 20 years of trying something, it didn't really pay off that well. What am I missing here? I need to rethink. And I think to support people who are in that phase of a recovery or wanting to manage that, where they've got lots of questions, that curiosity, if we've got a gift to give, it's building agency in people like that.
Yeah.
And that's when peer support's really powerful.
Yeah. Empowering them.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Because for so long, you, like you say, relies on medication, substance abuse, things like that. And to literally suppress it without even realizing why you're doing this. And then suddenly get into the realization after a long time, excuse me, that you don't want to go down this road anymore. Then what's available to you? Oh, the clinical route. But actually, there is another way.
And in some regards, I think, well, I can only speak for myself, Kate. I think it was important that I went through that, rocking up for lots and lots of appointments. How are you going to fix me? How are you going to make me well? And I think it was important to go down that road, because what it did teach me was I was probably looking in the wrong place all them years. Whilst I still struggle with my mental health now, I definitely have a different awareness of it. I don't look outside of myself to maintain my wellness. I look within. That makes me a terrible customer in the mental health world, doesn't it? I'm really well, but I was a very good customer for many years.
I'm still a customer, but I am moving towards that. Yeah.
And that's a very condensed version of what happened. Okay, I have to be honest, and there may well be times in the future when I need the mental health services, and I'm not closing that off. Just where I'm at the minute, I noticed that when I had a shift in terms of the agency I placed within myself, I noticed I was able to manage my mental health better.
So let's talk about then how your current role evolved. When did you start providing peer support to other people?
So I work within a very small team within the urgent pathway over in the East Midlands of Up Courage. Up Courage is a national offer. So I work in a very small team, myself, 2 mental health nurses. There's sort of 6 of us, if you like.
Right. When was Up Courage founded? When did it start?
The old service was called the Transition Intervention and Liaison Service. I know it just trips off the tongue, doesn't it? And then it was felt that some veterans were needing a little bit more intensive support than what that service could offer. So it was around 2021 that high intensive service was commissioned. And then that was recommissioned a couple of years later to what is now called the urgent pathway. So I sit within that urgent pathway.
Wow.
And in terms of peer support, my job was newly commissioned in 2022. They thought it'd be a good idea to put peer support work in, and not least because veterans can take a little bit of unlocking to talk to. And it just come at that time when a lot of services, peer support was expanding throughout the NHS, and they just felt like they needed that offer really to help normalise veterans' mental health, because some veterans really do find it challenging to talk about their mental health.
Sure.
And so I started my job at the early part of 2022. The service is very short term. So in terms of peer support work, it's quite a challenging environment to offer peer support work in. It's a really, I might see somebody once or twice, or, often I think the longest I would see somebody is for around 6 sessions or something like that.
Right.
So it's a distilled version of peer support work.
Yeah. How is that? How is that seeing someone for quite a short time, right?
Initially, it was really challenging because I didn't feel like I was a peer. I didn't feel like I was a peer support worker. In the traditional sense of the thing, I found that quite challenging initially. Some of my peer colleagues might work with people for months or years.
Yeah.
So it felt really challenging. It felt like I was selling our trade short in some regards. But I think that is the beauty of peer support work, is the adaptability of it. And it took me, a good 6 months to a year to even, how can I integrate peer support work into what is essentially not dissimilar to a crisis service. We are seeing the most acutely unwell veterans. Yeah, it was trying to get my version of peer support to work within that team.
Yeah.
And the team also, to be fair to the team, putting peer support work into a small professional team drastically changes the dynamic of that team.
Mm-hmm.
And, these people are registered professionals. So I'm sure for them as well, there was some period of adjustment needed.
Right, right. So when you say professionals, what are you talking about? Psychiatrists and things like that? Or?
Not in our team. We have 2 senior mental health nurses.
Right.
We have a substance misuse nurse, and we have 2 social workers.
Right, I see.
And
yourself,
myself,
who's a peer supporter.
And a community support worker as well.
Wow.
And of that small team, 2 of them are veterans themselves.
Right.
And the rest of us all come from military backgrounds.
Yeah. I think there are challenges associated with integrating peer support into historically kind of professional environments. And how's that work for you? How have you find that?
I think within the team I'm in at the moment, I'm really fortunate because my colleagues are very, very person-centered. I don't have to challenge a lot at all. I really don't. Uppermost for them is the veteran or their families, etc.
Can you describe a memorable experience where you felt that you made a particular impact through the support that you've been giving?
I think picking one's really challenging because it feels like, by nature, Kate, I find it difficult to stand alone within this sort of endeavour that we're taking on at the minute in Up Courage. It doesn't feel like I'm comfortable saying that I've done something. But I think as a team, I think we make significant difference to the veterans that we support. And I don't say that trying to avoid the question.
No. I understand, sure.
In the service that I work in, no single member really works alone within it. Well, they call it a multidisciplinary team approach. And we really do embody that. I can show you pictures on the wall of lots and lots of veterans cards where they've really felt like we've made a difference. I don't know, maybe that is the military culture in me as well. I suppose that I find it quite challenging to really blow my own trumpet. I find that difficult,
Yeah, but I think it's really heartwarming to know that your very small, close-knit team you said 2 veterans in there, yourself from a military background, And I think having that kind of background within the team and the fact that you are being so effective as a team in making a difference, and peer support is an integral part of that. I think that's incredible and so needed. How many other trusts have this kind of facility? Because you're actually based near an RAF base, aren't you?
Yeah, we're right on the doorstep of RAF Waddington.
And I can hear those typhoons flying overhead.
Yeah. So Up Courage is a national offer throughout England, and I sit within the team that covers the East Midlands. So believe it or not, we cover 6 counties. Just our little small team, we cover 6 counties. So if you're a veteran within England, you could access Up Courage.
Are they all based near military bases?
No. To be clear, we are the NHS. We have NHS employees. And without boring your listeners too much, Up Courage is a partnership. So there's what are traditional NHS trusts. So I work for the Lincolnshire Partnership Foundation Trust. Well, as part of Up Courage, we have Walking with the Wounded is a partner agency within that. We have Tom Harrison House, which is a rehabilitation centre.
Yeah.
We have the Ripple Pond so that we can support partners and family members.
Yeah.
We have our dedicated therapy pathway for what we would class as service-related or military attributable trauma.
Yeah.
So that's within the Up Courage pathway. And I could talk. We could do a whole podcast on
I'd love to do that.
No, yeah.
I've heard of charities like Walking with the Wounded. I think they're fantastic. So let's talk about the training that you received then for this role, Gary. Could you sort of elaborate on that?
Yeah. So with your good selves, Kate, I remember within maybe the first couple of months getting a link from With You Consultancy. And so I joined that cohort and I took my role on. I completed that training because if memory serves, we had 4 initial sessions and then off you go and see how you get on with them and then you come back together. Yeah. So I had that training and I remember that being my first introduction to formalised peer support. And as I say, I think I was probably about 50 at the time thinking, oh my God, this is a whole new world to me, you know. But it was helpful training insofar as it introduced me into the idea around the core principles of peer support.
Did you have one of those moments where you thought the core principles of peer support are kind of being explained to you, but you're like, wow, that's what it is and that's what it is. And you could like identify it with the support that you'd received, albeit informal?
Yeah, I mean, for me, Kate, it was take reciprocity as an example. To me, that word didn't mean a lot. And it didn't mean a lot at the time. I recall going through the training, but actually taking that framework and then making it real for me, that took some time after the training, And I still got back to the core principles and they are our anchor, if you like.
Yeah.
They're not a rigid framework, but they are our anchors and we should be checking in with them, So that was with you within my first year. I then went off. I am a bit of an anorak, Kate, if I'm honest, and I went off and done counselling courses and went back to college. And just because I think it's quite all-encompassing, the mental health world, isn't it? Yeah, I was sort of springboarding on this newfound sort of agency in myself.
Yeah.
I'd probably neglected that for many years, the wanting to do that academic side. So yes, I went to college and then I had some really good training around from the Hearing Voices Network guys, the Maastricht interview and what have you. And then at the Trust, Lincolnshire Partnership Foundation Trust, commissioned a bit of in-house peer support work training. And it was accredited at level 4. So I was on the first cohort of that. That was early part of 2023. And then just carried on really, Kate. I don't think it ever stops really, does it? The training that you're doing,
No.
But I think there's a distinction, isn't there? I do try and stay in my lane with training. And I get a lot of offers for what you would class as clinical training, if you like.
Right.
And I'm a bit of a rebel and push back against that.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, because I think that is one of the challenges of peer support is it's certainly within statutory services, is you have to be so mindful of watching your role drift, becoming just another professional, I'm quite fierce in terms of peer support being that point of difference. It's so easy to just become another clinician or another professional, and you have to sort of fight for that,
That's why checking in with the principals regularly kind of grounds you, doesn't it?
Yeah. In some regards, within the NHS, you get lots of opportunities to develop, etc., etc.
Sure.
Sadly, that isn't necessarily always within peer support, and I would love to see that get developed. Sort of 9 times out of 10, if you want to develop, it isn't going to be within the peer support work world, which
at the moment,
at the moment, and that's what I'm really excited about in the years to come. Is we've got that critical mass now, haven't we?
Yeah.
We've infiltrated the system.
Yes.
But how do we get parity with our colleagues that have gone down the social work and occupational therapy and nursing, and how do we get parity with them?
When you say parity, what kind of parity are you referring to? Do you mean in terms of the way peers are viewed?
Yes, I think so. I mean, we have to be honest that the vast majority of peer support work positions are in lower paid,
yes, of course,
lower banded roles, certainly within statutory services. We have to be honest about that. And there is small pockets of progression but it's not widespread. My hope is over the next 5 to 10 years is we go through something like social work went through, sort of 10, 15 years ago, where it was seen as sort of a poorer cousin within statutory services. But I think we need to be mindful about how we do that. I think that there would be pitfalls if we over-professionalised the profession.
Because the people who are going to be responsible for kind of uplifting this role to achieve parity, for me, I find it hard to think that they can be convinced that the qualification that you need for this role, first and foremost, is lived experience. They're not going to see that on the same level as going to uni for 4 years or whatever, are they? So I think that, and also professionalizing the role, over professionalizing, takes away that kind of rawness, doesn't it?
It does. And I like you, I'm conflicted in what I've said there. There's conflict in it. But equally, if you look to America and Australia and that, with the registration of peers and what have you, and having a governing body. And I get people's hesitation to go down that road, but I think for formalised peer support within statutory services.
So the support, the type of support you give.
Yeah. I think as a cohort of peers, we need to have them conversations. There's pockets of, we have lived experience executives sitting on executive boards now. So there are movements in the right direction. We as a cohort of peers need to think how that develops. But I think if we're going to be taken seriously within statutory mental health services, then it should have our attention.
So I'm going to ask you 2 final questions now, Gary. I ask these to everybody. What would you say is your biggest achievement?
I'm going to give you an honest answer here, Kate. 5 years ago, I was in a desperate state, Kate. I really could not see a way forward. My biggest achievement was turning that around.
Wow.
That was it.
I get it.
Just turning that around, because I didn't think it was possible to turn it around.
Making me get emotional here. I can see it. I can see it in you, yeah.
Yeah, it was just that. I often say to people, when every perceivable option is equally catastrophic, and I always say perceivable option is equally catastrophic, that's when hope is lost. And I've been to that place. So to turn that around, that's probably, and I didn't do it alone, Kate. I've done it with the support of people. But turning that around is my biggest achievement. And my wife and son.
Oh, that's beautiful. And to have that is the hope that you embody for people who don't have any. And that is such a gift. It's such a gift. And I'm so, happy seems a really kind of glib word, but, genuinely, because I think you do an amazing, incredible job that we don't hear enough about in this community, your community, the community that you work in, the veteran military community. So the last question then is, who is your biggest inspiration?
I used to answer that question, and I've had a few interviews in my life, and I used to answer that question with either Richard Branson or, as I got a little bit older, an adventurer called Sir Ranulph Fiennes. I don't know if you know Sir Ranulph Fiennes.
Yeah.
Because they felt like appropriate people, they're like humbling kind of people. But the reason I was hesitating there was because, and you probably answered it for me, was I'm kind of inspired by myself in some regards, Kate, if I'm honest with you. I don't look to other people to be inspired. I kind of expect that. I hope for that for myself. Expect's the wrong word. I hope for that for myself. Yeah.
Wow. And when you said that you actually previously that you're introspective, you said you get a lot of your strength from within. I guess that's part and parcel of it.
Yeah, because for so many years that was never there, or it wasn't fostered. It was never. When we go back to how do you make yourself well, that aspect of getting well isn't fostered, but it's vitally important. So for me, that's been the difference, is fostering that side of myself, having my own awareness and understanding of myself, and the agency I have in maintaining my wellness is paramount.
It's wonderful. And what a great job you're doing. And I really wish you all the luck in the world, all the very best on your journey, your recovery journey, your life journey, your career journey, because it is an incredible story. And I just want to thank you so much for coming in to speak to me today. I really appreciate it. And it's been an absolute pleasure to meet you.
Oh, thank you so much, Kate. It's been an enjoyable, and I know it's took us some time to get together, hasn't it? But we've been both determined to get this thing done. And yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. It's been a great pleasure to meet you.